Hello and welcome to 24 Lives Per Second, Guernsey's only film podcast. I'm Winter Tyson. I've officially stopped watching any new trailers for Prometheus, and this is episode 4, Happy Hunger Games. My fellow tribunes are Russell Kellaway.
Hello.
And Peter Taylor.
Greetings.
And today we will be looking at what's on at the Mallard Cinema, including a review of undercover cop high school comedy 21 Jump Street. In the second half of the show, we'll take a look at The Thing prequel The Thing and the baseball movie Moneyball. 2 Jonah Hill movies in one podcast, but fear not, because first up is The Hunger Games.
You want to see what I got you today? It's a Mockingjay pen. As long as you have it, nothing bad will happen to you. I promise.
Welcome and happy Hunger Games.
I just love that. Ladies first.
Primrose Everdeen.
I volunteer as tribute.
You're stronger than they are.
There's 24 of us, Gail. Only one comes out. No! Take care of them, Gail. Whatever you do, don't let them starve.
Katniss Everdeen, the girl on fire!
What did you say to your sister when you volunteered at the reaping?
I told her that I would try to win for her.
And try you will.
I just keep wishing I could think of a way to show them that they don't own me. If I'm gonna die, I want to still be me.
I just can't afford to think like that.
Based on the first book of Suzanne Collins's phenomenally successful Hunger Games trilogy and directed by the brilliant Gary Ross, The Hunger Games tells the story of Katniss Everdeen, a participant in the titular televised deathmatch. Peter and I have both read the book, and so Russell, as someone new to the story, does The Hunger Games live up to the hype?
Does it live up to the hype? How can it possibly live up to the hype? I think it's been so massive so that it would literally have to be the best film I've ever seen for it to live up to the hype, if I'm honest with you. But like I say, I was new to the whole Hunger Games universe, and it did make quite a big change for me to go and watch a film that I knew relatively little about. And I think this did it made me enjoy it a bit more. It was nice to be sat somewhere and not kind of know what was going on. Or I tried to kind of stay away from it as much as possible. Never kind of picked up one of the books or anything like that. So I think that helped. The first 60 minutes, I loved it. I thought the setup of the world of kind of Panem with the haves in the capital and the have-nots in each of the 12 districts was great. I thought that the juxtaposition that they actually did that was set up in one jump cut. They did the kind of the little bit of text at the beginning, then they showed a little clip from kind of the upper class people, and they literally just cut straight to the kind of District 12, and it was all a bit grimy, very kind of Winter's Boney, which Jennifer Lawrence had kind of starred in previously. But I thought that was a great way of setting something up, and also it did away with what could have been potentially a whole host of exposition that I think is always something that you're going to struggle with when you're adapting kind of the first book, a very popular book in a series. It's like doing an origin story for a superhero. You've got to get through a lot of heavy kind of stuff about what the universe is like. But I thought they did that really well, and so I was kind of sat there thinking, okay, this is going to kind of motor along at a cracking pace. So I kind of sat there through the opening hour, really enjoyed it, and I was thinking, well, if this bit's good, then surely when they get to the actual Hunger Games themselves and they're in the arena fighting and everything's going on, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to absolutely love it. And then it got there and I just got really bored. I was waiting for something big to happen, coming towards the end. Like I say, having not read it, I was basically waiting for Peter to die. I wanted a death in there. Someone, not you, Pete, the character. If no one's seen Hunger Games, character called Peter. I quite liked him to go away at some point, but only to kind of serve the narrative in an exciting and not tweeze the wrong word, but not wrap it all up nicely in a bow, which I was waiting for something to happen that would then spur you on for this, second part of the story, which is obviously going to come when they kind of do the second book later on. And it just turned out that it didn't. It didn't really do that. And all the things that I enjoyed about the second half were the bits where they talked about the uprising that was happening kind of in the districts and all kind of the rallying against the state and everything. That was all very much kind of flitted over and never really kind of came to the fore. I suppose with 2 more books to be adapted, maybe some of the things I wanted that movie to focus on will come to the fore more in the second 2. And so I suppose that might be something where I'm
It's interesting
slightly
you
let
mention
down.
that because that's actually not in the book at all.
Right.
As far as
okay.
I'm aware, I can't remember any of the uprising stuff being in the book, which
okay.
I thought they set it up for, because I mean it's obvious what's going to happen. I mean
Yeah.
I haven't actually read the second book, so I don't know. But to me, it's obvious that there is going to be some kind of uprising.
Yeah.
But I thought the film alluded to that much more than the book did when I first read it.
As an outsider, that was my view on it. Cracking first 60 minutes, not so good second 80 minutes. But I don't know. It's just I was disappointed. I thought it would be better.
So Pete, now we've both read some of this. You've read the first book. I've read all three of the books. As an adaptation of the first book, how do you think it stands up?
I actually thought it was very good. I thought it didn't. See, book adaptations can stray too far from the subject, and it didn't. It left out one or two things, which I think, and the two things it left out, I can't remember being particularly important in the book anyway. And it was pretty faithful to it. The only problem I had was because I'd read the first book. Plot is so important to me, and wanting to know what's going to happen. And I've read books and I've seen the film, and I've seen the film and read books before, but I've never done it in such close proximity to each other. I mean, I finished the book about a month ago, and it was so fresh in my mind. It was hard to just think, right, this is going to happen. Now this is going to happen. And it just lost its way, which is why I'm finding it more interesting in speaking to the people that haven't seen it, to see because I almost want to know what effect it had on them, because I always almost feel that was lost on me. But I was impressed at how they did it. The setup, I thought they did that very well. They could have taken a lot longer in doing that, and they just didn't need to. I felt a bit flat after I left the cinema, personally. It just, I don't know. I mean, I saw you briefly, Winter, after we left the cinema, and you seemed to quite enjoy it. I gather you still think that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought as a film, I think it's brilliant. I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. I thought the adaptation was fantastic. It's my favourite type of adaptation, where they just cut the fat straight out of the book. I had that really annoying thing for the first few minutes of the film, where the person sort of sat in the row behind is going, "Oh well, that didn't happen like that in the book," and that's Peter, and you got those bits and pieces going on, and there were a couple of bits in the film where sort of the spectre of adaptation was present. There's some backstory to do with Katniss and Peter that, to be honest, works well in the book, but you could have just got rid of those few flashbacks from the film entirely. And there was that moment where she's up in a tree, she spots a nest, and the hosts go, "Well,
yeah,
blah 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 blah
that's
blah."
what I mean. That
and
was one of the worst bits.
Yeah,
for me,
I specifically hated that scene.
I think it shows that how concisely and how good the rest of the adaptation was, that in those couple of moments they really stood out as quite needless. I mean, in the book, Haymitch is introduced in a different way. Here, he comes in a bit later in the story, and it works just as well. It's and also there's a bit of business with a pin, this Mockingjay pin that she wears. In the book, that's a much more heavily sort of emphasis bit, and it's to do with someone else who lives in the district. Whereas in the film, she gets given it at some little like jumble sale looking thing.
Oh, well, actually, I was surprised because obviously, the one thing I do know about it is having seen the cover of the book and the posters and everything. That's a pretty big deal in terms of the symbolism in the film. And yet, like you said, I was surprised that it took such a little part of it within the film. So it's interesting to hear that that's got a much deeper history kind of throughout the early book.
But I suppose as well, one of the things with the whole trilogy of books is that first of all, they're all told from Katniss's perspective, and throughout the books sort of follow her political awakening as well, and her awakening to what's really happening outside of District 12. So I thought within that respect, they kept the focus as narrow as they could. Mm-hmm. I think if I had to pick something that I didn't like in the film, and I'm searching for something because I really did enjoy it. I think the actual timing of the Hunger Games, the progression of time, got a little bit lost. In a similar way that the vampire movie 30 Days of Night, you kind of lose track of where they are within the 30 days. There's no real sort of timekeeping within the film, and that part wasn't quite satisfactory.
So how did you think they could have done that with subtitles? Maybe said day 1, day 2.
Well,
or that
myself, I just thought, why didn't they just cut cut down the length of time they're in the arena,
Definitely.
rather than
it could definitely have been squeezed down a bit into a shorter period
and
of time.
although, I mean, I've got to say, I didn't look up how long the film was before going in, and I was very surprised to find out it was over 2 hours because the whole thing went very quickly.
So maybe I shouldn't have looked up how long it was because I was expecting to be kept entertained throughout the entire thing, and towards the end, I wanted it to end because I wasn't bored, but I was close to bored, and that sounds awful. But I think that's because of the book, and I'm trying to judge it based on the film. But I'm honestly finding it quite hard, and the violent scenes, to pick out a point that I really didn't like, were awful. The camera was just all over the place, and it was rubbish. You couldn't make out anything that was going on. It's like the director had literally just shaken the camera everywhere, and I absolutely hated that bit, and that's what ruined the fighting for me. So, everyone, for recommendations, Winter?
Oh, I definitely recommend it. It's better than the book. I mean, I quite like the book. The book was good fun, but it's a better film than the book is a book. Do you see what I mean? But definitely recommended. But with the proviso that it's quite a strong 12A.
Yeah, my recommendation would be if you're not going to read the book, watch the film, but read the book, and don't bother watching the film if you've read the book.
So that was The Hunger Games, and also playing at the Mallard is 21 Jump Street. Now, this is a reboot of an 80s TV show that most people know as that thing that Johnny Depp was in that I never really saw, but is on Internet Movie Database, I think, etc., etc. Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum play a pair of incompetent police officers who are sent undercover in a high school to uncover the source of a killer drug. It sounds terrible, but what did we think?
We both went to the cinema to see this, and I had a great time watching it. Absolutely great time. I laughed the whole way through, and I thought it was brilliant. On reflection, it was utterly ridiculous. I mean, I didn't realise how ridiculous it was until I thought back to it and just thought, this is just stupid. I mean, it had the basic story. It has, these two guys, they're good friends. You have the typical falling out, getting back together, a resolution. But that literally is the bare bones of a story. There really isn't much there. It's just them kind of dicking around in a school. It's essentially a high school comedy with a bit of, we need some action as well. So obviously it's a reboot, but it really is utterly ridiculous. But it's ridiculous in a good way. If you know you're going to watch a movie that's stupid but funny, then this is exactly what you want.
Now, I'm having a bit of trouble with this one because I really enjoyed it when we went to see it, and very funny. You laugh at a lot of stuff, and there's so many jokes that a few miss, but there's enough there to keep you laughing, and they're genuinely funny. Channing Tatum was brilliant. I thought playing essentially the straight role to Jonah Hill's funny man. And very good at playing the sort of the jock who doesn't realise he's ridiculous. And the great thing about his performance is there's no comedy acting in it. He's playing it straight. I mean, I wouldn't like to suggest he maybe doesn't know, but it's a comedy. But he plays it perfectly straight, and it works perfectly well. However, we're a week and a bit after seeing it. Yeah. I'm having quite a lot of trouble remembering what some of the funny bits were. I'm having quite a lot of trouble remembering too much about it, apart from some explosions.
The only thing that stands out for me is the joke at the very, or not the joke, but just the thing that happens at the very end, which I just thought it didn't feel like it fit into the film. It wasn't that film.
With the shooting?
The shooting, yeah. I don't think that fit into the film at all.
No. I mean, I've...
I'm laughing thinking about it, actually.
It's funny because I remember speaking to you, Pete, last week, and I got the impression that you really enjoyed it, and I felt a bit like, I didn't really love it. And now it's interesting that you're a week later, because I was thinking exactly the same this morning. I thought, right, I'm going to sit down, do a little bit of work on the podcast, think of what I'm going to say about 21 Jump Street. So what was funny in 21 Jump Street? What were the jokes? And I suppose I was the same. I couldn't really pull one out where I was like, that bit was hilarious. Yeah. The only bit I could remember was the bit when a guy gets his knob shot off. And I actually turned to my wife.
See, I'd forgotten that bit.
Yeah.
Really?
All I'm thinking is how similar James Franco's little brother looks to him.
Yeah. Because I actually, at that point, I turned to my wife and went, did that actually just happen? Because that's a bit far. It's a bit much. I mean, I hate it. It's obviously my week for feeling average about film, which is a bit of a shame, really. But I mean, I really wanted it to be really funny and stuff, and it was. And I remember being funny, but it just wasn't that memorable. I mean, I always take the mark of a good comedy is, am I going to go back and watch it again? And will I laugh at it again? And like this, no, I won't. I can watch Anchorman twice a week and I'll still be in stitches. And yet this film I watch once and I'll forget about it and I'll never go back to it again.
I knew as soon as I finished that I'd be getting this on DVD and watching it again and showing people because I think they'd find it funny.
I think what's really good about 21 Jump Street is the way it does the switcheroo on who the cool kids are and who the, exactly. in this version, it's the jocks who are essentially not liked at school, and the nerds are now cool, which is great. And I think one of the nice things within that is that even then it doesn't entirely like the nerds. It doesn't seem to think it doesn't say anyone's better than anyone else, which is quite nice. So there's it's a bit like American Pie, I thought, where American Pie was one of those films. It's very funny, but the reason it's so nice is because it's so generous to all the characters, and this had that similar sort of streak. But of course, it's wrapped up in this. Well, you want to say police investigation, but it's nothing really. It's just like a setup for some jokes about getting high, essentially. As enjoyable as it was, I'll probably watch this when it comes on telly.
Maybe.
If I'm truthful, I'll probably tape it, then delete it a few months later, having not watched it. But still, it's worth if you're looking for sort of a fun night out with some mates and
definitely
whatnot. Yeah, go and see it, or get a DVD when it comes out, and you'll have a good couple of hours. Yeah. Longevity, I don't think this is going to be on any.
It's certainly not a classic.
Ever made,
I said I was going to go and watch it.
It's no
again,
Super Troopers. It's not, is all I'll say.
It's not something that I'm gonna watch again and again and again. But I definitely recommend it. It's funny as hell, and go see it.
Okay, and the other movies at the Mallard this week are the really quite brilliant The Muppets, The Woman in Black, still worth seeing, still going as well, which is quite impressive. Contraband, which by all accounts is meh. The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, and we actually had a bit of correspondence on this. Someone saying, I had a really good time at the cinema, nice comedy, and a lot of people are giving a lot of good feedback about it. And we bought a zoo.
Anyone
go watch this? Anyone
for any feedback on We Bought a Zoo? No, I don't think so.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at new releases on DVD and Blu-ray, and this week the big release, I think, anyway, is The Thing.
48 hours ago, we found something quite remarkable.
What'd they find?
There's a structure
In Antarctica.
and a specimen.
Really?
We estimate it's been here 100,000 years.
I'm going to take a tissue sample.
Do you really think that's a good idea?
Yes, I do. You, my friends, will all be immortalized as the people who made this discovery.
Did you hear that?
My God.
Somebody was attacked.
But it seems everyone is fine.
Either someone miraculously healed themselves, or someone is not who they say they are. I think this thing copies its prey and then hides inside it.
What are you saying?
Not all of us are human. It could be any of us. We can't let this thing leave. If it makes it out of here, millions of people could die.
This is not a remake of John Carpenter's outstanding Paranoia Fest, but a prequel, maybe even a requel.
Maybe.
Or a pre-make.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Think so. It's definitely not a prequel.
So, given that we know where this film ends with a helicopter chasing a dog, we know what the story's going to be. Does it work?
Yes.
No.
How so?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose I would say yes, because I mean, it's horror for the first point, and you go and watch a horror, and you tend to know where it's going anyway. Horror in general, has certain beats it's going to hit, and so I think horror is the one genre that can get away with that, with you knowing where it's going to end. And I think another good thing about the original The Thing by John Carpenter was that it left a lot of things that could be expanded upon, and that's where I think this film does actually very well. I think there's a lot of love for the original film by the people who did this. Let's call it a prequel, just for the sake of it, because they do try and fit it around that, and it segues very nicely. I mean, I think it would make a good double bill. I think you could sit there and you could watch The Thing, and then afterwards you could watch The Thing. And I think you'd enjoy them both.
Which one would you watch first?
The prequel. You would watch the prequel
really?
first. Oh, yeah, I would. Yeah. Good. That's my point. I think it does almost dovetail perfectly into it. It ends as the first one.
Yeah. I actually think I would have enjoyed it more if I'd have done it that way round, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's potentially a valid point. I mean, I was gutted because I wanted to hate this film. I wanted to hate it. I wanted to come in today, talk about the podcast, and go, yeah, that was rubbish. Remakes are naff. I wish Hollywood would stop doing it because this is an example of why they shouldn't bother. It's empty, it's vacuous, it's pointless. But I sat there for the 90 minutes it was on, and I really enjoyed it. The effects I thought were fantastic. I thought it lost itself for the last kind of 10, 15 minutes. I thought it got a little bit kind of crazy.
But it did that thing that a lot of modern movies do. I mean,
it does.
The first one where I really noticed it was years ago watching The House on Haunted Hill, which is like a schlocky horror film. But it just has that moment where the CGI just goes past the tipping point and you just go...
Yeah, and I think all the tension that it built up throughout the earlier kind of 2/3 of it was then kind of just almost pissed away by some kind of big crash bang wallop monster action, which like I say, it just didn't need to do. I thought it could have almost kind of meandered to a really interesting conclusion, and then it could have kind of segued into that opening kind of the original. But I mean, look, like I said, I was surprised. I thought I'd hate it. It's interesting that I thought I'd hate this and I loved it. I thought I'd love The Hunger Games and I wasn't so big on it. So it's a strange week for movies for me. But no, The Thing, I really liked it.
I mean, I really liked the way that it, as you say, it fits in with the original. I mean, if you kind of watch it looking at some of the sets going, oh my God, that looks exactly the same. And I'm sure it does. But what I like is if you were to watch them back to back, you'd essentially start with the prequel and the film would get slower and slower. You'd have sort of 4 hours there and it would get slower and slower and more tense. And I think in that respect, it fits perfectly. And what I really liked about it was, even though, obviously it ends with the first shots of the original.
It's getting confusing.
But it's still plotted in such a way that there is suspense and they build up storylines sort of around that and to the side of those images, whereby you still kind of thinking, what is going to happen? Who is it going to be? And there's very nice sort of mirrorings of, say, the scenes where they do the blood test in the original. That's very nicely mirrored. And in a really... What I quite liked was a lot of the stuff they did was very simplistic, which in a lot of films you kind of think you're just getting convoluted. You're trying to be smart. But here, like the original, they go this, right, bunch of people in a base in the middle of nowhere. What could they possibly do to do? And the solution they come up with, I think, is very ingenious but very simple. And it's just a very good horror film. And I was a bit worried thinking, CGI compared to the sort of the puppetry and physical effects of the first one. But you know what? It works really well.
It was very good CGI.
And I think part of the acknowledgement of that is that they're confident enough to go all out with the creature quite early on, which was a surprise. Yeah. But like I say, it works nicely in that you essentially start off with a truck falling down an ice ravine, finding a spacecraft. And after 3.5, 4 hours, it's two men sat in the ice just
looking at each other, waiting for one of them to go.
I thought it was really good. Peter,
I get the sense. Here we go, right. I was entertained, but it's interesting to hear you guys talk about it because what you think are its strengths, I think are its weaknesses. Mainly being, you said, I sort of thought, I recognise that, and by the end of it, it's just like, I recognise that, recognise that, recognise that, and in the end, it felt like, there's the bit with the axe, and they must just, it just felt like they were crowbarring these things in. It was, because I mean, the axe, for me, I don't know why, but that was something that I really remember when in the original, they go to the people's base camp, and at the end, it was just like, God, we better put that axe thing in. I'll just get him to try and chop a thing in half. And it was absolutely rubbish. I just really, really, it ruined it for me because and the thing is, and you say, it mirrored it. They just used the same stuff. They had the same pool table. They had the same blood tests. They had the same burning body in a pit. It was just, it ruined it for me. And I didn't like it.
Basically, what they've done is they have made a remake. They have actually made a remake, and then they very cleverly turned it into something else. Because like you said, it hits the same notes. It does a lot of the same things. It has some of the same scenes, albeit changed in a slightly different way. But the reason that it works is because what you've got in the original thing is the same thing happening to a different bunch of people. That's what they're saying. That's why I think there is room for it. Anywhere else, you'd say, "Tosh, this is ludicrous." As Peter's looking at me saying, "Yes, that's what's happened." They've just remade it, but I think there is that scope because you've got to remember that Kurt Russell's going back to this Norwegian base to say what's happened here, and funnily enough, what's happened there is about to what's happened to you, and so I think I think it's allowed to happen in that way, and. Like I said, to be honest with you, Winter, if you hadn't suggested us watching it, I would have sat at home and I would have totally written it off and gone, this is a disgrace and a crime against cinema. They're remaking it. Let's just watch the original. But like I said at the start, I really enjoyed it.
See, that was it. I mean, the reason I suggested we do it is because when it came out on the Region 1, I was really excited to see this film because The Thing is one of my favourite films. I was chronically excited by it. Thought, oh my God, they've done a prequel. That's the best thing ever. That'll be fantastic. But you always have that little thing. It's like, Indiana Jones 4. Yeah. Oh, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be. Is it?
It's not going to be.
I'm surprised you thought it was going to be good. I mean, and it's impressive that for looking forward to it so much, you actually haven't been disappointed because I went into this thinking it's going to be awful, and it was awful.
Okay, well, you've said some very interesting things, Peter, but quick show of hands, who enjoys The Thing?
You can't see here, but no one has put their hand out.
It's 2-1. I think we can recommend this.
I think we
even
can.
if it's just to, just to annoy you.
I haven't irritated myself by watching it, so if you like that kind of thing, you'll probably think it's all right.
Okay, and now just moving on, we also have Moneyball. Peter, I wonder if you could tell us about this and what you thought of it.
Right, I'm just going to be brief on this one. I really, really enjoyed it, and I didn't think I would actually. Mainly because I don't know much / anything about baseball, and I didn't think Jonah Hill would be very good as a serious actor. But the Oscar nomination really surprised me, and it actually sort of intrigued me. So I did go and watch it, and I thought it was really, really good. It kind of sets itself up a bit as, I mean, it's basically about. These guys in baseball, I can't remember who it is, the Oakland Raiders. Is it the Raiders? No, the Raiders of the football team. Yeah,
Oakland A's.
A's, sorry, yeah. And basically it's about these two guys that get players based on their statistics because they can't afford anyone bigger. Now, they didn't really explain the statistics and what they were. I think it was getting on first, which, fine, I don't know really what that is. But the thing is, it doesn't really matter. It's not you don't have to know all the rules of baseball to sort of follow this. And its strengths were its acting because I love Brad Pitt in most things he does. He's just a solid actor, and he played this really well. And Jonah Hill was just his perfect foil really because he played it so sort of straight and deadpan, and it worked really well as this guy that sort of come in straight from college and started doing this really sort of statistics-based baseball. And in the end, it kind of came out like a Dirty Dozen of baseball. I mean, it wasn't quite like that, but it did have that element of, oh yeah, this guy smokes loads of weed, he's the badass, this guy's really fat, and, it's the kind of, forgotten men of the sport, and that was quite cool how they brought it all together. But it didn't do the typical thing of, oh yeah, they're starting to win really well. I mean, he went to the depths of, he did all. It's based on a true story, but everyone sort of hated him. He's what the hell is this guy doing? He's ruining baseball, and then obviously it does do the typical turnaround. Oh wow, I cannot believe what he's done. This is amazing. And it did do that to an extent, but it was good in the way it did that. And I hadn't realised this, but Aaron Sorkin wrote the screenplay for it, or collaborated on the screenplay, and it showed, because the dialogue in there is really good, and the cast is really good as well. Philip Seymour Hoffman's in it, and he does really well as playing the coach of the team, which I actually thought Brad Pitt was. He's not the coach, he's the GM, who I guess makes the decisions on the players they buy, and ultimately they're sort of who gets played. But I thought Philip Seymour Hoffman did really well as the coach, and I would recommend it. Even if you don't like baseball, even if you don't like any of the cast, I think they do well enough to make you believe they're actually these characters, and yeah, I'd recommend watching it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to second that. I really enjoyed it. I'm a big fan of the Freakonomics books. This is essentially, Freakonomics, the sports movie.
Okay.
In that it takes just a slightly different way at looking at statistics. So you got 3 guys who are superstars, but on average they get to base this percent of times. Why not buy 3 much cheaper guys who on average equal the same amount of getting to first base, which is what I presume they're talking about.
Yeah,
but see, even with that slight kind of like,
distance,
I'm not quite sure what rules they're alluding to here. I thought it was very well explained. I thought it was quite easy to follow, which, I think Aaron Sorkin's got to be your guy to go to for technical, jargon-heavy type stuff. What I liked about it was, although it was Freakonomics, and in some ways it sort of reflected in kind of the clash he has with baseball as a body, is that although it sort of takes the fun out of sport, it's still a story about a bunch of underdogs. So it's kind of having its cake and eating it in a really, I think, in a really entertaining way. So you have this kind of everything's about the stats. We've got to throw everything out the window. We cannot have stars. We cannot have, we can't carry these millionaire people. The people who, you remember sports for the individuals, despite, all the kind of rubbish about sports being team games. You remember the individuals, but this one said, no, it's got to be a team game. It's got to strictly be a statistical team game, but it still had those little underdog sort of personal moments of personal
especially
triumph.
Brad Pitt, he emphasised it because he was so adamant that he was sticking to this thing. You admired him for doing that. And he was the hero.
I thought Brad Pitt was brilliant in it. I think as he gets older, he's, he's always been a good actor, but I think he's sort of mellowing into a much more interesting actor than he used to be. And Jonah Hill's brilliant. Jonah Hill's, he's very funny in the comedy films like 21 Jump Street. But here, I think he was right on the money as sort of the statistics guy, as the guy who, loves the sport with all his heart. But for him, it's the numbers, and it's a whole other dimension of sport. And I thought, sort of as a duo, as sort of a mismatched pair, I thought that was a really interesting relationship. And I suppose the film's partly a story about the manager's faith in this guy, in this new way of looking at sport. And I was thoroughly entertained for a good couple of hours. And to say, I've been to see a baseball game, it's sort of the most drawn-out, low-scoring thing I've seen in my life. And for them to make that an entertaining sport, an entertaining movie, I think fantastic. Okay, and finally, there's just time for our sort of any other business part of the show. So, Peter, what have you been watching? What are you looking forward to, etc., either or?
Well, I haven't watched this, but The Devils is going to be released on DVD on the 19th of March. And as I say, I've never seen the film, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I do hear that it's not the director's cut on the DVD. As far as I'm aware.
That's right. It's the... as far as I'm aware, it's the British X-rated cut, which Ken Russell worked so closely with the BBFC to get the film through. It's a matter of minutes, and from what I've read online, it looks fantastic, which, I saw it on telly 10, 15 years ago, maybe, when Channel 4 showed it, and I still vividly remember most of this film. So I'm looking forward to catching up again with it. And Russell?
I've just a couple of things to mention. The first one is the only reason I mention this is because I believe the teaser trailer for Part 2 was released today. But I had the bad fortune to sit through Breaking Dawn Part 1 over the weekend. And quite honestly, it's one of the worst films ever made. Not just from a story perspective, but everything. From scripting, from the way it's shot, the score. The fact they obviously had to pad it out to make 2 movies out of one source novel as well. I mean, I honestly, please, if you're listening, I mean, obviously, if you're a fan, you've already seen it, so I don't need to talk to you. I'm not even trying to offend you, because if you're a fan of it, then you're going to enjoy it, and that's fine. I'm just trying to save everyone else who might be in the middle. You know, I caught it as half of a couple of fans. My wife is a fan, and so she kind of watched it. I mean, even her herself will tell you that the film is far from perfect, but I'm just telling you, it's actually so far from perfect, it should be in the bin.
So how does it compare to the other Twilight movies?
Well, you see, I mean, I've seen the other ones. They're quite interesting. You know, they're obviously full of that, you know, teen angst thing, but that's the whole angle it's taking, so that's fair enough. But this one, I mean, there's nothing good about it. The effects are awful. You know, the wolves talk to each other as wolves, and it's without moving their mouth. It's very strange. There's a bit with a CGI baby at the end. I was laughing with horror at what I was watching, and especially because Last of the Mohicans was on the other side, and I only found that out afterwards, so that was a kind of a double bit of pain for me, unfortunately. On a more positive note, on the 27th of March, a documentary called Corman's World, Exploits of a Hollywood Rebel is released, and it basically features interviews by, I think, basically everyone in Hollywood about how Roger Corman kind of influenced cinema for the last 60 years, and it looks like a cracking kind of bit of documentary making, so, you know, leave Breaking Dawn Part 1, watch Roger Corman instead.
Okay, and talking of Bowie movies, I finally caught up with Apollo 18, which is sort of this weird found footage science fiction horror. And you know what? At 80 minutes, it's a lot better than you'd expect it to be. I think it's a smart little film, well worth catching up with. I also had the utter misfortune of seeing the Gerard Butler starring Machine Gun Preacher, which sees...
more Machine Gun than Preacher is a review I read of it.
Oh, don't even get me right. It's a guy who's a criminal, seemingly kills someone, and nothing's ever done about that, but never mind, who becomes a Christian, then goes to Africa, where he builds an orphanage and kills some more people. And it's just as patronising and self-aggrandising as you'd expect. Apparently, it's based on a true story.
Apparently.
If it is, not being funny, but who the fuck is this guy? Pardon me, I know you're going to beep that one out, but who is this guy? And why the hell has no one reined this bloke in? But it's one of those really awful stories where a white Western person works through their own personal angst, seemingly by shooting nameless black people in Africa.
That's the poster quote.
And it's terrible. But what I'm looking forward to next week is Hugo, which is out on DVD on the 2nd of April. I didn't catch it at the cinema,
Yeah, it was great.
so I'm quite excited to watch it in a week's time. Okay, this was 24 Lies Per Second, featuring Russell Calloway, Peter Taylor, and myself, Winter Tyson. Join us again in a fortnight's time for more film and cinema babble, including the new Aardman film Pirates in an Adventure with Scientists. And feel free to get in touch via the Guernsey Film info page on Facebook. And if you like what you hear, why not subscribe to our 24 Lies Per Second YouTube channel, which is 24 LPS, I believe.
Yep.
Thank you very much.